Okay, so I'm starting a new project here. As you can see, this will be a Walltree unit for a client that I'm building. This is going to be a fairly detailed build. This will be birch plywood. The dimensions will be 48 by 14 deep by 65 inches high. Uh, like I said, I'll be using 3/4 inch birch plywood and also poplar for all the trim and the top bench and top of the unit itself. So here's the plywood here. I have two sheets here in the truck. I also have a half a sheet that I'm going to need that I have left over from a previous project. So it's going to be about 2.5 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to start ripping it down to manageable pieces, then bring it to the table saw. So this is the process now. I'm going to be using a track saw. You don't need a track saw. You could use a circular saw with a straight edge, which I've done for years. It's really not much different. I think track saw is a little bit of a cleaner cut, and it does make it a little easier. I think a little safer too, since it rides in the track. As long as your track is your guide is level, you're good to go. So what I'd like to do, I like to measure everything out, see the layout of what I'm going to need piece-wise. So right now I'm going to start just cutting the side pieces out for, I'm sorry, the tops and bottom pieces for the bottom box. This is going to be two boxes, essentially with cubbies on top and bottom. The bottom is going to be about 14 inches in depth, and the top is going to be about 12 inches in depth. And they're going to have four cubbies each, so it'll be a little lip on the front, or sorry, on the bottom bench seat, which is fine. And I'll join them with dominoes and pocket screws and cover with trim. So all the trim, like I said, will be poplar. That's going to be rough sawn, and that's will be milled up. You'll see that process later. I'll mill it all at one time for the most part, top and bottom, and all the trim. Like I said, I'm going to pull the track saw out, set the guide up, put the clamps on, and just rip everything in more manageable pieces before taking it to the table saw. And here's the project I'm going to start now. Okay, so I'm going to be starting step two now, and to do that, we are going to be preparing for all the joinery. So what that means is I'm going to be marking out all of the spots and the lines for the dados. We're going to be using dados for these, for the cubbies, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to mark out the edges and do calculations to see you know, where I'm going to put the cubbies. And so they're going to be about 12 inches on the center ones and 11 and 3/4 inches on the two end cubbies for top and bottom. So there's going to be two cubby systems on this, one on the bottom, one on the top. The only difference between the two is the bottom is going to be a little deeper. It's going to be about 2 inches deeper. But otherwise, they're going to be the same. So they're going to be cutting these all together. So here I'm going to be removing the conventional blade and putting in, also pulling out the riving knife, and I'm going to be putting in a dado stack. And sometimes I'm too lazy to do this, but I'm having a lot of cuts for this, so it's going to make it easier just to put the dado stack in. It's also obviously safer and makes quick work of this. So that's where I'm at now. I'm going to be making the dado cuts and making final rips on the plywood to final dimensions. Okay, so step 3 is going to be assembling this carcass now, which will be two carcasses. The top I won't fully assemble until the bottom bench is completely milled up and built, but we'll set the cubbies up at least. So right now I'm going to be dry fitting it, just to make sure everything fits, and tap it in with a mallet, just to make sure everything lines up and square for both cubbies. And I'm going to be speeding up, obviously, a lot of this process, just so I can make a video that's not, you know, 40 hours long. So I'm going to be using some glue here, and clamps, and some brad nails, 18 gauge brad nails. I'm using 1.5 inch brad nails, and also going to tap them in with countersink and some trim screws. Now the screws will be covered up for the most part with dowels, plugs I'll be using later in the video, you'll see, unless the very bottom of the bench. You won't see that, since it will be a platform underneath there to a certain extent, so you won't see that anyway. So this is where we're at now. We're just going to do, going to build this up, make sure everything's square, and then we'll eventually put everything together later. So it'll make more sense after everything's milled up. Okay, so here obviously you can see I'm using the domino joiner here. I don't want to get too in detail with this, but I just changed out the bit to a smaller bit to make smaller mortises here because since I'm going to plywood, I didn't want it to change the split in anything. So I just took out the 50 and put in a 40 bit, and I'm going to use that instead. Also, I'm going to be just buttoning up everything here, just putting on the sides for the tops and the bottoms coming up here, and also I'm going to be using pocket holes also to reinforce these long sides for the top cubby. And here I'm just going to put it on the feet, and this is not just buttoning up the bottoms and top shelves here, the cubbies. So I'm just going to be putting in the feet and cutting with 45-degree angles, so just doing like angled feet underneath, going from the front to the back. I just brad nails to connect them. So that's what I'm doing here. So I didn't want to get into detail with the domino because that's a whole separate other video. But here I'm just going to be putting the bottom feet on, and they'll be on 45-degree angles here, as you can see. Okay, so this step here, I'm going to be laminating the tops and the bottoms and also cutting up the trim. So right now I'm just cutting up this poplar. This is, I would say it's 6/4 poplar. And I'm going to be, and it's rough as you can see here. So it needs to have quite a bit of milling done to it. These boards are a little janky. So I'm going to be cutting them the rough length to start. And then I'm going to be taking them over to the jointer, planer, and table saw to cut them to the final width eventually. Not so much that order, so, but this is pretty much the same process with any mill up. So, and we'll be just clamping these up with glue and biscuits, and you'll see that as we get further in. But right now we're just trying to get this wood to get a little flatter because it's pretty bowed up and cupped. So the idea of this is get one straight face, flat face, and one straight edge before we take it to the table saw here, which that's the step we're at now. So we're just going to go through these steps and for the trim and the tops and bottoms. I will be bouncing around a little bit here though. So you can see here I had to pull the tracks all off. One of these boards just wasn't getting perfect with the jointer, and it was just taking too long. I had a little bit of a twist to a certain extent on the edges, so it kind of gave it like that moon look no matter what I did with the jointer, even though the one came out good, but the other one was just taking too long. And you want zero seam. You want to be able to have just a real tight seam when you're laminating tops especially. Or anything where the client can see. You don't want any gaps in your glue up. So you really need to have a straight edge here. And it just was a little quicker to use the track saw to really get the one. And here we are. We're just going to use the clamps, some glue, and the biscuits. And just nice even pressure with the clamps on the bottom tops and also on the sides. Okay, so it's the next day, and we're going to be cleaning up these top bench and the top of the Walltree here. Just cutting to the final length with the track saw, and we're going to clean up a little sanding. We're not going to go crazy right now because we're going to sand again later after we get everything test fitted. So which we're going to be doing now with the domino. We're going to be putting our new mortises in on the top bench, which will be lining up with the mortises that we cut out earlier on the side pieces for the top cubby. So we'll dry fit this eventually here just to make sure these side panels fit and they're nice and straight, and there's no seam, and also they're flush on the edges here. So we're just going to be putting the dominoes in, and we're going to eventually test this. The cool thing about the domino, a lot of people don't realize the plate on the bottom here has a line on it, and I'll point this out here. This line is going to be the center mark of your mortise where you want it. So, and if you mark everything out correct, this makes it very simple. There's one on the bottom plate, and there's also one on the plastic cover on the front of when you fold down the top plate, so you can see your line. So it's very important to mark out everything. And here I'm just going to mark out where I'm going to be brad nailing and screwing in the this is the top cubbies upside down here. So we're going to be throwing some screws in here eventually too with some glue and brad nails. So here I'm going to be covering up these countersink screw holes with some wood dowel plugs, and these are 3/8 inch wood dowels that I'm going to countersink out, as you'll see here, and it's going to plug them in with a little glue, and it just covers them up in case the client ever looks underneath the bottom of the top cubby, which they probably won't notice, but it's still just a nice practice just to cover up everything and makes it look nice and uniform. So these steps here are going to be similar to the steps we did earlier with the tops and bottoms. So it's just going to be a mill-up process. Cut the rough length with either a circular saw or miter saw. I decided to use a circular saw here because the wood was kind of janky and I didn't want it kicking back on me. Sometimes you could do that. So we do that, run it through the jointer real quick and run through the planer, and obviously we cut to the final width on the table saw when we have a good straight edge. So now we're just cutting all this trim up and make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay, so now we are going to be using glue, pin nailer, which is 23 gauge, and some bandy clamps and some regular clamps just to secure this trim. This trim is not a face frame, since this is going to be acting almost like a veneer cover over the plywood. That's all really it's doing. It's not more structural, it's more decorative. So we're just going to be using some 23 gauge pin nails, and we're going to cover up some wood putty, and then sand it. And here we're going to be buttoning up everything now. So this is getting towards the end of the project where we're going to be doing a lot of sanding of the unit itself and also the tops and bottoms. And we're going to be running a chamfer here with the router just to soften the edges on the trim here. So that's what we're doing now. Then we're going to be next will be a lot of sanding, and then we're going to start priming and painting this unit, the bottoms and tops, and also the back panel. So for the primer, we're going to be using like an acrylic bare type prime, and we're going to be doing at least 2 coats of this, and in between coats we're going to do like a light brush sanding with a brush pack. So that's where we're at now. So while the paint is drying for the units themselves, I'm going to be taking the back panel, which has just 2 coats of primer on it right now. We'll roll the Sherwin-Williams paint over this later. So here, what I'm doing here, I'm using the track saw in the guide and did some calculations again, which I hate doing math, to make the back 1/4 inch panel look like a faux shiplap and paneling. So I'm going to be using the track saw here. So I just took 2 inches off each edge, and I used the guide to find my spacing. Let's use a track saw and cut it the shortest depth on the track and just ran the lines. So now here we're just going to be finishing up the tops and the bottoms here, bottom bench and the top. We're going to fill in some of the knots. We're going to fill in some epoxy, and we're doing nice light sanding up to about 220 grit. And we're also going to run a chamfer on each edge here to soften up the edges on the tops and the bottoms. Here I'm just countersinking some holes for some trim pieces for the back of the top of the cubbies, and this is just going to be giving me some where I could use for nailers for when I mount this in the client's house. I'll have a way to use these for like my nailing strips to screw them into the studs. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, so this project is coming to a finish here. So what I'm doing here, I'm just putting some stain on the bottom bench and also the top of the unit. And it's going to be using some English chestnut the client wanted, and it's going to be putting a coat of that on, and also going to be finishing it with some polyurethane, water-based polyurethane, the triple thick polyurethane, 2 coats of that, or 3 coats actually, and I do a light sanding in between each coat. Even though it says you only need 1 coat for that, but like anything else, I like to have a little more to give a little more of a sheen. So here you can see I'm marking out my spots for the hooks. We're going to be putting 4 hooks in for this unit, and these hooks I got off of Amazon. The client picked them out, and I'm just going to countersink with a self-centering drill bit here, and then I'm just going to drill it in with the screws that were provided with the hooks. So now it's time to mount the top cubby to the bottom cubbies here, and I just actually I had my son come out and help me do that. I forgot the video, and I just tapping it in, but also going to be using these pocket screws just to help just make a stronger connection with the dominoes and glue, and they'll also act as clamps, since I don't have a clamp big enough to really reach from the bottom to top of this. And obviously you see I'm covering up the pocket screws with some little trim pieces here and some 23 gauge pin nails and a little glue, and just putting them in. And really this project's pretty much done. It was very fun to do. We're just going to put the back on now and get it ready to ship it out to the client. We delivered it and mounted to the studs, and the client seemed to love it and was very happy with it, and it came out very nice. It was a lot of work. This is a long video, but hopefully it helps somebody build these Walltrees, not to overcomplicate them, but also make good quality product, and the client will love. Thanks for watching.